Good evening and welcome everyone to Richmond Valley Council's March Ordinary Council meeting. I'll open the meeting with the acknowledgement of country. Richmond Valley Council recognises the people of the Bundjalung Nations as custodians and traditional owners of this land, and we value and appreciate the continuing culture, connection to lands, their living culture and their unique role in the life of this region in the past, present and future. Mr General Manager, could you read the prayer, please?
Dear Lord, we meet to serve our Richmond Valley community, to use our resources wisely and well, to represent all members of our community fairly, and to make decisions that promote the common good. We recognise our responsibility to the past and the future, and the rights and needs of both individuals and community. As trusted servants, we seek blessings on our deliberations and on our efforts here today. May we act wisely and well. Amen.
Amen. That brings us to item 3 on our agenda, which is public access. Tonight we have 3 requests. The first being Mrs Liz Stobbs addressing Council in relation to the item 14.2, Energy from Waste Framework Review. Ms Stobbs. Welcome, Liz, and you have 5 minutes, and at 4 minutes you'll get a bell. Is that turned on? We might, there's a spare speaker over here. We could, if it works. Is it working? Yep.
Yep.
Would you like to move over there, please, Liz, if you don't mind? Thank you.
Put it in there. You can see.
Yep.
Can you put it in there? I can't see. Put that in there.
You're good. You comfortable there?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Stay there, please.
Okay.
When you're ready, Liz.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I'm looking at the recommendations for this item. So, I endorse point 2 of Council's recommendations to strongly support removal of the Regional Jobs Precinct as a priority infrastructure area for energy from waste facilities. However, as governments can change with election outcomes and different influences can come to bear, I'd like to see Council take steps to ensure that in the future the RJP cannot be reinstated as suitable for energy from waste. My understanding is that Council has trouble with people either inadvertently or intentionally disregarding guidelines on sorting waste. I can imagine how frustrating it must be when recycling is contaminated and rendered unusable. Recently at Namoona, I saw Council workers documenting a truckload of deposited green waste that was riddled with metal and plastic pieces. Is it possible for Council to lobby for funding community education around effective source separation, recycling and reusing, promoting community initiatives around repairing and assisting Council to work towards zero waste, which is the backbone of a circular economy? Having looked at quite a few zero waste case studies, it's apparent that source separation is the key to reducing residual waste and the need for disposal, and as a consequence, greatly reduce landfill requirements. 3.3 of the recommendations, I applaud Council's commitment to seeking alternate waste treatment solutions as part of a circular economy. However, the form these strategies take is critical for our future. This is an opportunity for Richmond Valley to become a regional leader in zero waste initiatives that could be truly effective in reducing landfill and working towards a circular economy. There are many European zero waste case studies Council could be informed by and adapt to our local conditions. Also in point 3 of the recommendations, Council's support of the state government's, quote, proposed changes to the definition of thermal treatment, as well as the proposed exceptions relating to powering industrial or manufacturing processes on site, unquote, is very problematic. Pyrolysis and gasification are technologies promoted by the incineration industry and are likely included in the redefinition of thermal. A redefining that itself smacks of George Orwell's doublespeak in his book 1984. Under European and US legislation, pyrolysis and gasification technologies are both classified as incineration, and the use of any resulting fuels will generate globally restricted and deadly persistent organic pollutants, or POPs. Australia is signatory to the Stockholm Convention and the Basel Convention, both of which commit signatories to protect human health and the environment from POPs and other hazardous waste. A much more positive outcome for human health and the environment, as well as landfill reduction, would be for Council to investigate alternative waste treatments that don't involve combustion, such as mechanical recovery biological treatment, MRBT, gas phase chemical reduction, GPCR, and supercritical water oxidation, SCWO. Material recovery biological treatment is proven, effective, and does not generate toxic ash or air pollution. It neutralises residual waste so that methane and bacteria are eliminated and the volume of waste is greatly reduced. Gas phase chemical reduction and supercritical water oxidation have the potential to not only manage our residual waste, but also hazardous waste, which is our fastest growing waste stream, without the associated dangerous pollution impacts that waste incineration causes. Gas phase chemical reduction has been used in WA to dispose of toxic PCB stockpiles. All 3 of the above technologies, MRBT, GPCR and SCWO, are far cheaper than any form of incineration and can be scaled to suit the requirements of different localities. A truly circular economy designs out waste, keeps products and materials in use and regenerates natural systems. Our current load of residual waste is a design flaw that needs to be addressed at the highest level. To quote Paul Connett, if we can't reuse it, recycle or compost it, industry shouldn't be making it and we shouldn't be buying it. I look forward to seeing how Council proceeds with the next phase of its investigations into alternative waste treatments.
Thank you. Under time. Would you take questions if there's any?
Sure.
Any questions from the councillors? Councillor Murray.
Thanks so much, Liz, for coming, and I'm glad that you're happy with the recommendation. I know that I sat in the mayoral appointments with the different locations, and this was a theme that come up constantly from Casino to Evans Head. Do you think the supply chains like Unilever, Colgate and the big corporations have a responsibility in reducing or changing the supply in their packaging, so when we're buying things from the shelf they're more sustainable and we can get rid of them?
That's the ultimate responsibility, really, not to produce the unrecyclable waste in the first place. And up until now, there hasn't been any producer responsibility. So that's what I mean by design flaw. And if producers were granted tax exemptions or other incentives to change the nature of their product, that would be something I would support.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you very much, Liz, and I apologise for the inconvenience with the speaker. Thank you. We're good to go over here. Our next speaker is Ms. Deborah Bell. She'll address council in relation to item 5.1 Mayoral Minute, Tropical Cyclone Alfred, Impacts and Recovery. Come forward when you're ready, Deborah, please. Welcome, Deborah, and no doubt you've seen the 4-minute bell and then it'll be 5 minutes.
Yes.
So when
Yep.
you're ready, please start.
Yep. I hope my laptop stays up there. I'd first just like to thank all the representatives from Bridge Street and Richmond Street in Coraki that have joined us today as well to be here as part of this, looking at the flood. I'm here today to speak about the impact of the inadequate stormwater drainage and its impact to our properties on Bridge Street adjacent to Windsor Park and beyond. When we first heard about Cyclone Alfred, of course, we were all very concerned, especially after sustaining more than 6 foot through our home at 34 Bridge Street, Coraki, on the 28th of February 2022. We had been concerned that the new footpath that was created by the Richmond Valley Council had not included any drainage when it was installed. At the corner of Bridge Street and Adams Street, the footpath heads downhill and continues onto Richmond Terrace. The hill flattens off at the exact point where the storm drain goes to the river, Richmond River, and where the sump is, I believe, that runs to the easement that is at the rear of our property at 34 Bridge Street. When the road was sealed at the corner of Bridge Street and Adams Street, they also only did a small amount, approximately 2 metres, and ironically it stopped exactly where the 2022 flood got to. So there's a house on the corner and you can see the lines from the surveyors where they've stopped, and it's only being done to there. We were also questioning at that time that it was done that it did not include repairs or maintenance to the drain. So we've had 2 incidences there, the footpath and the road being repaired, and still the drain going down the side is covered in grass and starts halfway down the street past those 2 things that have been done recently at Bridge Street, and we were wondering why. On Friday the 7th of March at approximately 3 p.m, the Richmond River was at 1.84 metres as the Hazards Near Me advised, and we took photos of the rear of the huge amount of stormwater that had collected in the rear of our properties at the base of that footpath. I've got these all available in regard. There's the footpath there that heads down, so there's no drainage. The drainage starts down here going down the street. I've got these on a USB that I can give to somebody. Yep. When it's relevant. That's a picture of my husband on this 3:30 on the 7th. So with the rivers only 1.84, not flooding at all. We know it's 3.7 for the minor flood. So that's all just impacted from that rear of coming down that hill and lack of any drainage whatsoever, and whether or not the drain here that goes over to the river, whether or not it was even working, because it certainly hasn't been looked at all, as to my knowledge, from 2022. This vast amount of stormwater then flows through our yard between 32 and 34 Bridge Street and out into Bridge Street, where it then heads down to the end of Bridge Street and fills up the grass drains at the end in front of some of our guests here tonight, and that is stormwater. 34 Bridge Street, hang on. This water is definitely stormwater, as you can see by the photos we've provided. The next morning, that, oh, I should have the photo of that, but I've got it on the USB. If we went out in the morning and all of this water had basically disappeared, we had like 2 big puddles. Before then, all the water feeds back up through the drain and then fills it up again. On that same day, on the 7th, this is the sump in the corner of Windsor Park, which is bubbling up from the stormwater, not from the floodwater, from the stormwater. I had David Cash come and tell me that it was because it's being pumped out from the tennis courts. But the volume of water that was coming out, and there's obviously toilet paper and effluent in that area. And then you can see these small drains here. As that backwater from the swamp at the end of the street comes further and further over, that then mixes with this and then all goes back down to the tennis courts and the end of our street into those drains where our children are. I think I've said that bit. On the Saturday morning, Graham Weir took those photos. Saturday the 8th of March, 8:33, Hazards Near Me reported that the river at Corrico was at 3.86, keeping in mind that 3.4 is the minor flood. That night, the flood waters from Casino and Lismore started to impact, started to rise up, and then that fills up that area in behind us again. We can see an aerial shot that someone took, and you can see here, this is the area that I'm talking about. Behind these houses at the bottom of that foothill where there's no drainage, so there's water pouring down here, there's water filling up here and pouring out between our red roofed house here, and then back down filling up this area, and which then impacts on all of these on the Richmond Terrace, where this sort of grass road, I'm not exactly sure, and all these drains which aren't maintained. I haven't got a picture of the other end, but at the top of corner of Nolan Street and Park Street, where there's a drain behind there, that was already full as well from stormwater before all of this started filling back up and heading towards us. And obviously, you know, that's when I started writing emails, because I, you know, after going through 6 foot in your house, you're wondering why this is happening again when in 2017 it didn't happen at all. So I don't know what's changed, what other drainage they've done in here. We had a question from one of the residents about whether or not there's drainage behind at the end of Park Street that goes into Nolan Street and into that drain down behind Windsor Park that is also filling up and impacting from that area.
Deborah, have you got long to go? You're well over time, but if you can wrap up in the next minute.
Yeah,
is that okay?
I've got a list of questions, if I can just... These are the questions that we sort of came up with. Height of the storm drain going to the river from Adams Street from the drain. So at what height is that backing up? And then which department is responsible for the said drain and its maintenance? Which department is responsible for ensuring that the flood cover is installed to prevent that feeding back up of that drain into that area that I'm showing you there? Sorry, here. When fixing the road at Bridge Street, why wasn't that drain, why didn't they do anything about it? And why didn't they do anything about the drainage when they did the path? When they did this, why didn't they fix the drain cover, the covered grass area there, sorry. When they built the Adams Street footpath, said that. When they installed Adams Street footpath, there wasn't adequate drainage created. And that's why we got 3 times as much water in that area and through our backyard and then down through and filling up that back, at the back of Bridge Street. When the new drainage was installed in Park Street under Adams Street, where does that run off to? So I've printed all these out so I can give you guys a copy.
Please
and
do.
The last one is just in regards to the storm drain at the corner of Nolan Street and Park Street. What other drains feed into that drain? They're the questions we'd like to know, because obviously they impact all of those houses along that area and back into the back and around into Richmond
Can
Terrace.
you email council?
I've got them all on a USB. I can give them to you tonight.
Okay, yeah, that's
Yep.
fine. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you for listening.
No worries. Thank you for your coming and addressing us.
Yes.
It helps us to understand what's happening. So
Okay.
thank you.
Thank
and
you.
the General Manager will get a response to you.
Fantastic. Thank
Have
you.
you got those? Oh, yeah. Has any councillor got any questions? No, thank you.
No,
You've done an
all right.
outstanding job by the
Thank
looks of
you.
it. So thanks again, and have a safe trip home. Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr Clement McGeary, addressing council in relation to 14.1, response to notice of motion, buybacks and new home approvals for flood-prone land. Welcome, Clement. No doubt you've seen the 4-minute bell and then the 5-minute, but
Yep.
when you're ready, you can start. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I stand before you today to express my deep dissatisfaction with the response, or rather lack thereof, from New South Wales Reconstruction Authority regarding the critical issues raised in section 14.1 of our agenda. Our community has been grappling with the aftermath of a devastating flood in 2022. The urgency of addressing flood buybacks and new home approvals for flood-prone land in mid-Richmond cannot be overstated. At our February council meeting, we unanimously supported a motion seeking urgent clarification from the New South Wales Reconstruction Authority on future uses and restrictions to be applied to buyback lands within the Richmond Valley. We also sought answers to a series of questions on notice regarding Resilient Homes program. Despite our efforts and the pressuring nature of these concerns, we have yet to receive a response from the authority. The lack of communication is deeply troubling. Our community deserves clear and timely answers to navigate the complexities of flood recovery and to plan for a resilient future. The silence from the New South Wales Reconstruction Authority, especially given their current focus on recovery from Cyclone Alfred, is unacceptable. We understand the challenges posed by recent events, but the issues we raised are fundamental to the long-term recovery and viability of our villages. We have been patient, but our patience is wearing thin. The residents of Richmond Valley have shown remarkable resilience and cooperation in the face of adversity. They deserve to know what the future holds for their homes and lands. They deserve to see tangible progress and commitment from the authorities responsible for their recovery. I urge the New South Wales Reconstruction Authority to prioritise concerns and provide necessary clarification without further delay. Our community's future depends on it. We will continue to seek answers and advocate for the needs of our residents until we receive the response we deserve. Thank you.
Is there any questions? Or you'll take questions?
Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, I've got
Councillor
one.
Hayes.
Thanks, Clem, for attending and letting us know how you feel about the replies that we didn't get.
Yeah.
In your view, just trying to put this together, the information in today's business paper has the flood velocity maps, okay, and it goes, there's a lot of H5 area in and around Woodburn and the other villages down our way. To me, there's not enough information in there as to what velocities exist on that land. And it's very unclear to what you can do on H5 land at this present time. So if that could be clarified, is that what we're looking for as a huge part of the solution?
I think so. If you look at the maps, it looks to me like that data's been mostly drawn from probably just a level, probably LiDAR data, not necessarily addressing the issues of velocity, which I think could weigh in a lot on design and development.
Later on in the meeting, I'm going to ask the question about the velocities, so hopefully we might get some further answers tonight. Yeah?
Thanks.
Councillor Murray.
What do you expect based on your interactions with the Reconstruction Authority in recent times? What are you expecting them to respond with generally? Do you think we'll get the answers?
I've long lost the hope from a response from RA. We've personally applied as we own property in the area. Every time we've been met with no response, we've chased it up, get nothing. Chase it up again, get nothing. So it's good to see that it wasn't just us, that council can't get a response either, but it's unacceptable.
Thank you for coming in and sharing your experience with us.
Thank you very much. Apologies, item 4, no apologies, everyone's present. Councillors, we go over to page 6, 5.1, mayoral minute. I have an updated supplementary agenda for the mayoral minute that you would have received, and I will move that recommendation on page 3 of that. Can I get a seconder, please?
I'll second that.
Councillor Murray. Councillors, this is a updated version, and as we know, it's a work in progress. There's still assessments being done out there by council, by the governments, to find out what the actual impact from Alfred has had. During the event, I attended, well, before the event, I was actually down the lower river and went and had a look around what was happening while it was pouring rain and blowing, and I thought, what's going to happen? Alfred stalled out the coast. We all know the story. Then it went back out again and come back in. So it was like a bad relative visiting, and you didn't know when it was going to turn up. And people were getting anxious, and I could understand that. Personally, you'll notice in my minute that I mentioned neighbours. I've seen so many people helping each other. I had help from neighbours down at Riley's Hill, and also I had help and also helped neighbours out at the Bend. So that was good to see the community coming together. I also down the lower river, when I could get back down into Coracai and out to Rapville, I've seen and talked to people who had prepared after 2022, and as I was going to say, in the lower river, I've never seen so much farmers' equipment being moved to high ground. It was everywhere. So it was good to see that people had taken advice to evacuate and prepare. Some people to me say, oh, it was over preparation. To me, we never knew where that cyclone was going to come. It had been over 30-something years since this cyclone had come to the area, so I think it was wise and well worth the effort. You'll notice in there that I do mention in the minute about, I'll read it, from those who volunteered, the time and response agencies and community welfare organisations to the individual acts of helping neighbour to prayer and be safe. I'm immensely proud of the way that our community worked together to get the job done and responded to this challenge. In the past 7 years, we have been threatened by drought, bushfire, flood and now cyclone. And once again, we've all worked together to rise above this and recover, and we will recover. So I'll hand it over if anyone would like to add any comments or questions. That's fine. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Firstly, I want to acknowledge the strength, compassion and perseverance in our community after the impact of the 2025 Cyclone Alfred weather event, compounding the experience for many who have not recovered from the 2022 impact. I agree, the emergency response this time was much better than 2022, when the SES and 000 returned my own calls for help 5 and 7 days later, so the bar was pretty low. But significantly improved, that said. Communication, however, is still a struggle, particularly regarding pets, with conflicting messages on the SES social media accounts compared to the SES's website that indicated pets were welcome at the Evans Head Evacuation Centre. Within hours, this changed to no pets were accepted before the column was deleted completely from the webpage. This compounds the stress for people that are trying to find evacuation paths with their companions and their pets, trying to decide whether they evacuate or not. Then there was further confusion when a non-authorised lookalike disaster management organisation by the name of NDMS, a not-for-profit, once I looked up their credentials on the ABN lookup service, told Woodburn residents online that the Woodburn Public School was the evacuation centre for pets, when in fact it was not an official evacuation centre at all. This confusion meant many, including our elderly, stayed in their home, potentially putting lives at risk if the 2025 flood turned into a 2022 scaled weather event. The community feedback I've received suggests that the emergency response efforts could be enhanced by clearly communicating these locations and the facilities of evacuation centres much earlier, along with providing streamlined, clear messaging. It seems these weather events will happen more frequently, and purpose-built evacuation centres on flood-free land should be planned and funded for Richmond Valley community members. I note, Mr Mayor, in your mayoral minute report that you've said over the past 2 weeks, Council has been working to ensure that our community's voice is heard. Further, the government has also moved swiftly to ensure that appropriate disaster declarations are in place and our community has access to the disaster recovery allowance for affected businesses and employees and the disaster recovery payment for those personally impacted through property damage. The overwhelming feedback I'm getting from the community contradicts this statement, and I would like you to reconsider its wording. I spoke with a single mother of 3 teenagers who had $20 left in her bank account while she was isolated in Korakai for several days. When she reached out to the SES for essential food, they informed her that they could not assist unless she placed an order from a local shopping centre, a purchase she simply could not afford. Despite being a full-time casual worker who pays taxes, she had spent all her money on a major grocery run in preparation, and being confined to her home prevented her from getting to work to earn more money. Many are still frustrated by the slowness of the release of these grants. These affected areas in the Richmond Valley was not declared a natural disaster until yesterday at 11:45. The newly appointed recovery coordinator, Mr Tanner, stated on radio words to the effect, "I wasn't able to access and assess damage in the areas affected in our Richmond Valley region until the weekend." I would like to highlight today that we have cost-effective drone technology capable of speeding up these assessments. Such technology could expedite disaster declarations, ensuring that affected individuals can assess emergency assistance as quickly as regions that were less impacted this time. Then, when people went to apply through Centrelink for the $1,000 per adult and the $400 per child, namely the 2025 disaster recovery payment eligibility, the eligibility criteria indicated the following options: I'm unable to leave my home due to a flood or damaged roads. Second, I'm stranded in an impact area. Or third, I'm stranded outside an impact area and unable to return home. This means that isolated communities like people living in the Richmond Valley could have received access to these grants as early as March 13th, just like every other region affected to the north and south of us. Once again, the community has been forgotten. This is the general sentiment of the community, and according to these eligibility criteria, residents of the Mid-Richmond should have qualified for the grants on the 13th of March, just like everywhere else. Instead, we had to fight and write to politicians in the fight for fairness.
Any other speakers? Councillor Hay.
Yeah, I've got a few things. Look, this flood, this cyclone, this flood, the last event has highlighted the need for things that haven't been put into action since the 22 floods. The CSIRO report, everyone's saying, where is it? Okay, we're going to be 3.5 years after floods before we see it. That's if we see it in June this year. We need it. We need to know what's in it. Things that have come up down our ways, the Fabra Dam's getting talked about again and the height of it, and letting the water out of the river at the right and the wrong times. You know, once again, it's highlighted the need to look into that a bit further. Councillor Murray said that we were forgotten. Look, I felt that way when I listened to reports. I stopped listening to the reports on the media. They used to go from Tweed to Byron to Lismore to the Clarets. Nothing in between. You had to go and do your own homework. The Bureau of Meteorology river heights was something that I used continuously while I was monitoring the floods, because I've got family spread right across the catchment, and they were really good. But the problem with them is they're not all ADH levels. You know, the river heights from one measuring gauge to another, they're not all ADH levels. They're all different, and it's really hard to work out what's going on. Unless you've been around it, for new people, if you've been around here for a long time and you understand the river heights and the way they measure them, yeah, for sure. But a lot of the new people just got no idea what's happening, you know. So I think it's highlighted the need for follow-up work to proceed quickly, not 3 years down the track. I think that's what the highlight of what's happened in the last few weeks is to me. Thank you.
Any other speakers? No? Right, I'll use my right of reply. That, Councillor Murray, that paragraph in there refers to the government There has never in my time been a declaration made before the event. And Richmond Valley, from day one, with everyone else, was covered in the disaster declaration. From day one. And that's never ever happened before. I believe there was a lot of lessons learnt of the 2022 flood, and there'll be some more lessons learnt from this one. Councillor Hayes, as far as the flood study, I can recall in 2022 there was statements being made it's going to be made, take 2 to 3 years to recover, and then it was blown out to 5 years. The stage one of the CSIRO flood study, first stage was released, second stage was always planned for mid-year of 2025. So it's still on track. I believe the government response has been outstanding compared to previous times. They've been here, they've listened. As far as the $1,000 payment in that program, I met with the Premier and Senator Jenny McAllister, federal member, federal senator in Kyogle, and I made it quite clear to them last Friday, I think it was, that Richmond Valley should have been included in that declaration. I know our local member wrote a letter to the Premier. We've done that work. The community also have notified the government. And the other day, as the report says, Senator Tony Sheldon was here and he made that announcement that that area of the Richmond Valley would be included, or the whole Richmond Valley. Bear in mind, all of the Clarence wasn't and all of Kyogle wasn't. So it's not as if we were left out. They told me in Kyogle they had to do further assessments. So that is there now. So I believe it's a better response. Sure, out of disasters, it's not 100%. We'll never ever have it 100% because all disasters are different and floods are different. Who would have thought there would have been a cyclone come in that low down the coast? It's only happened once before. And as I said earlier, people prepared for that. So there's a long way to go. There's still a long way to go from the 2022 flood. But we'll learn by it and we'll keep advocating on behalf of our community for the betterment of every resident here. One thing I will comment about the flood gauges, I followed that graph constantly, every hour, looking at the water from Lismore coming down to go to the Korakai, from the Bungawalbin and from the Richmond. Wyangri went offline for about 5 hours, and they actually filled it in. They must have gone and read it and filled a fine line on it, like a pen line. Then they got it back up and running, and Wyangri started up again, rising, and later on it stopped, and it was out for all night, and then the whole page disappeared, and then it came back the next day. So that's not good enough. I've mentioned that to one of our meetings with the Senator Sheldon, and I've also had a talk the other day to Mayor Mulholland in Kyogle. We'll be very pursuing that. Casino can read the gauges from Wyangri, Kyogle, Doubtful Creek, which is down below Toonabar Dam, and we get a gauge out of Toonabar Dam. So we've got about 4 or 5 places we can get some water heights. Kyogle has got Wyangri. That's it. When Wyangri went out, Kyogle residents wouldn't have known what was coming. And if it had been, well, they tell me up there they got more flood in this, more rain in this flood and a higher flood than they did in 2022. So whether that's correct or not, that's what they told me the other day. They need some flood gauges. I think it's Fawcett Creek that comes out of Green Pigeon. They need a flood gauge up that valley too. So we'll be pushing for better flood gauges for our catchment, and that will go right through the river. The trouble with the Bunga when Whipperee was going down, because Rapville just kept going up and staying there. It wouldn't drop, and that's why there's so much water in the Bunga coming out of Pickapeen. So, yeah, look, as I said, there's lessons to be learnt, but I believe the government this time has responded a lot better than they did in 2022. That closes the debate. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Carried. Confirmation on page 7, confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 18th of February. Can I get a mover, please?
Move, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Morrissey. Seconder?
Second.
Councillor Humphries. Put that motion. Is there any accuracy of the minutes? Yeah, just bring it down. It's fine. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Carried. Item 7, matters arising out of the minutes. Has any councillor got any matters arising?
Yeah, I've got one, page 7, just a question, item 14.1, page 7 in the attachments, page 7 of the minutes, page 10 in the attachments, sorry.
Page 7.
Yeah, the dot point I added, part 3, notes the urgency of finalising the floodplain risk management plan. Where's it up to and what's it been done? I've seen the grants in today's papers. There's a grant been approved. Is that for this flood? Is this for this plan or is that for past one?
Mr General Manager.
It's actually says 23, 24 in the.
Well, this project's funded and happening. It may have been a payment to do with that we have received. At this point in time, it's on time, which is basically towards the end of this year. There's obviously quite a bit to work through, so that's it's on time.
Thank you.
I'd need to just check the exact date when it's to be completed, but my understanding is sort of tracking on time, and we're certainly making sure it stays that way because we know it's critically important to informed decision making.
Any other matters arising? I have one. It's on of the attachment. It's on page 9. Delegates report from the Rouse County Council. It was item 12.1 in the agenda, I think. Rouse delegate report. Councillor Walker asked about the $29 million funds invested by Rouse, and are they restricted funds and what are they being reserved for? I took that question on notice. So the funds are categorised approximately as 2.7 million in unrestricted funds, 2.3 million in restricted funds relating to grant revenue, 508,000 for weeds grants, 1.8 million bulk water grants, 23.8 million in internal restricted funds, predominantly for bulk water, with a large portion of this allocated towards the large capital works program for the 2025 financial year. There's also a requirement under the T-Corp loan to have 50% of next year's forecast expenditure, less depreciation, as capped reserves. So I hope that answers your question. Any other matters arising? Thank you. Declarations of interest. Has any councillor got declarations of interest? Mr General Manager, have you received any?
No, I haven't.
Thank you. Petitions, no petitions. Notice of motion, there's nil. Mayor's report on page 9. I'll move that. Can I get a seconder, please?
Second that, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Murray, was it? Yeah, thank you, Councillor Murray. Any questions out of that? Put the motion in. All those in favour? Carried. Delegates report. There's a delegates report on page 11. The report but we're on page 10. Can I get a mover of that, please?
Move the
Councillor
recommendation.
Humphries, I'll second. Any questions of that report? We'll put that motion then. All those in favour? Carried. Page 13, matters, yes, page 13, matters determined about debate. Does any councillors like to call on any matters? Councillor Murray?
14.1, 19.3 and 20.1.
That'll be in matters for information later. Okay, so you've got
Sorry.
14.1. Any other?
17.1, Mr Mayor.
I will call 14.2 and 15.1, Mr General Manager, is that a planning matter? And 15.1. So by the looks of that, we need a motion for 15.2.
I'll call 15 too. I've got a question, so I'll
Okay,
call it.
so we don't need that. Makes it easier. Now turn over to page 14 for 14.1. Councillor Murray.
I move that, right? Or do Yep, I'll move that.
Yep.
I'll second.
Councillor Hayes. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've spent a considerable amount of time in the community talking to our members about the deeply inequitable distribution of flood funding. While we wait for the Reconstruction Authority to provide clear, basic accounting answers, I'd like to break down some critical figures from their 2023-2024 annual report. The Northern Rivers was promised $880 million. If that funding was shared equally across the 6,400 estimated affected homes in the Northern Rivers, it would amount to $137,000 per home. The Reconstruction Authority was tasked with making homes resilient, not demolishing them in the middle of a housing crisis by buying them back and having them sit there vacant for years. We were promised $880 million. Rather than investing in long-term resilience, so in the last financial year, rather than investing in long-term resilience, they have more than doubled the size of their executive team from 24 to 50 positions, with an average salary of $250,000 and a CEO on an estimated of over $600,000. In total, the Reconstruction Authority has spent $57 million on wages, which exceeds the amount approved for home raises and retro refits combined. And yet, but I'm here, would like to talk about the timelines on page 12 of that report and how many iterations of agencies our community have had that have been responsible for the failed Resilient Homes grants. We have seen 3 different iterations of these state government departments: Resilient New South Wales, the Northern Rivers Reconstruction Authority, and now the New South Wales Reconstruction Authority. But the inequitable distribution of funding doesn't stop with the Resilience Home grants. Under the section of this report titled Support for Local Community and Industry, here's how the funding has been distributed. Lismore received $5 million to deliver a repair to return home program. Lismore Council received $250,000 for a community vision statement. Richmond Valley Council received $174,000 for adaptation plans. And then there's a table 2 on page 35 of the report. A share of $1 million was distributed to 9 NGOs across the Northern Rivers. If that money had been allocated on, let's say, a per capita basis, the Richmond Valley should have received $86,000 for community resilience. Yet I understand the only funding we received from that pool of funds was for a community radio initiative, and that was just $10,000 from that $1 million worth of funding. Meanwhile, here's how the remaining $990,000 of funding was allocated. 6 projects funded in Byron Bay at least or more than $60,000. 4 projects funded in Ballina for at least or more $40,000. 4 projects funded in Tweed Shire for at least or more $40,000. 2 more projects funded in Lismore for at least $20,000 or more, and 1 project each for Clarence Valley and Kyogle of at least $10,000 or more. Now, the reason I say that it's $10,000 or more is because, from my memory serves me correctly, there were likely to be 3 grant streams, the Northern Rivers Community Grants Foundation, that handed out this funding. One was for $10,000, which is what the radio initiative got in Coraki. The other one, from memory, was around $120,000, and I believe there was a 3rd stream of funding for around $50,000. So the balance of that $990,000 is across those 2 other streams, distributed across those projects I've just talked about. So that's a total of $5.27 million that has been allocated. Along with, so if we're looking at the funds only dispersed in Lismore, that's a total of $5.27 million. And that is along with undisclosed amounts to Lismore City Council for the Converge program, another undisclosed amount for the Lismore-based living program that is now listed on a Google search as temporarily closed. So that's over $5.2 million. And that's compared to the Richmond Valley's $185,000 worth of funding. That is less than 3.4 of the total funds outlined in this section of the report in the New South Wales Reconstruction Authority's annual report. If that same trend, disproportionate distribution of support, applies to the Resilience Home grants, and our region only gets around 3.4% of funds available, that means of the 838 homes approximately destroyed or damaged in the region, and that's indicated in the Richmond Valley Flood Report from 2022, then that's approximately $29,920 million of the $880 million that we may get. That's roughly $35,000 a home, and over $100,000 per home less than what would have been received if the funding had have just been equally distributed amongst all home owners. Now, the real world impact on our community, boots on the ground, that this slowness of these grants has on people. And I will start with reminding everybody that David Witherden, former CEO of the New South Wales Reconstruction Authority, or it might have been the Northern Rivers Reconstruction Corporation, who knows, there he said, and I quote, "There will be around 2,000 buybacks, about the same in house raises, and more than that in retro refits." I have direct reports of people so frustrated by the lack of training of frontline staff at the Reconstruction Authority that have no clear pathways to get answers people need quickly. There's long, arduous application processes, and a change of their system required many applicants to resubmit hours and hours of paperwork under the appeal process. And if you're a senior citizen with no computer skills, this task becomes too hard to even start. We have two cases. So there was one woman, she wanted a house raise, she's from Woodburn, she wanted to stay in the community. She got rejected in 2023 in June, along with 5,300 other people. She fought through the appeals process for 2 years. Every day she'd ring the Reconstruction Authority, or she'd go into their office in Lismore. And the process got so hard for her, she was driving across the Wardell Bridge one day and she was screaming at the agent on the phone saying, "I understand why people drive their car off a bridge." That is where our community is getting pushed to beyond their limits because of the slowness of these grants that have been promised. That's where they're getting to. She got home and 20 minutes later there's a police officer doing a welfare check on her house. That is clear as day the impact that is happening in our community. When I walked into the last council meeting, I received a text message from a resident in Woodburn, and this is a quote: "Mum and Dad are still waiting for approval. Dad calls frequently to follow up. They've heard nothing. My faith in the system is so broken. We're 3 years on and nothing but broken promises. They ask Dad questions about his mental health and suicide with no follow-up or support after. I want to put in a formal complaint about that. We are mapped priority 4, which is why I've never bothered calling for an update. Mum and Dad are priority 1 and still waiting. There's a house 7 houses up and 3 houses down that are also priority 4, and 1 has been approved for a grant, so there is no consistency. The house 3 houses down from us was declined for a buyback. Their elderly lived here all their lives and only ever wanted a retro refit so they could stay comfortable in their home, living out their final days in the hometown they love. I'm okay with being deprioritised for our elderly, but they've waited almost 3 years and living in an unsafe home. We've carried the cost of rebuilding on our own. I shut my business down I love to return to a salary job so I could get more debt to rebuild. The main question we have is, why is it taking so long? Pushing people like my dad to the wall. There are 4,300 estimated more stories just like this across the entire Northern Rivers. So let's fast forward to 2025, Cyclone Alfred's and the Cyclone Alfred response. Yesterday, the latest executive salary added to the growing wage costs of the Reconstruction Authority, Scott Tanner, said on the ABC North Coast Breakfast Show that he's aiming not to leave anybody behind. I'm not sure if anyone in our community will believe that statement. Or tell that to the single mother I talked about earlier who's got $20 left in her bank account, and because we were not declared a natural disaster zone, she could not get access and apply for that grant, which is the same thing that happened across the whole of the Richmond Valley area of those who were impacted. Once again, our community has been forgotten, and I've talked about the eligibility criteria of when you went through Centrelink, that there were 3 items there that clearly indicated that we were in an impact zone and should have been able to access those $1,000 grants earlier. Further in the same interview, Mr Tanner said the SES are still servicing isolated communities, yet 3 days earlier, the SES New South Wales social media account posted across all platforms, Cyclone Alfred had officially concluded. Even though there were some in our community still inundated, still under a major flood alert, this causing more confusing communication that heightens a level of frustration in our already traumatised community. In that same interview, he also said they, or the New South Wales RA, only took over recovery on last Friday. To that, our community overwhelmingly says we've been battling through this for 3 years at the hands of the inaction of the New South Wales Reconstruction Authority, which has eroded trust in the organisation that was to simply deliver what was promised, $880 million. Enough is enough. The community is understandably beyond angry, and I applaud Clem McGeary for being able to contain his anger tonight, because many in the community cannot. And this recent weather event has only compounded what already is a mass issue across our region.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Hayes, seconder.
Yeah, look, to follow up from that, I think Councillor Murray's done her homework. Hopefully all the figures she rattled off there are true and correct. I feel the same way about the Reconstruction Authority, though. I really think we've been overlooked. And I've gone through this as it was my notice of motion, and I wanted to pull it apart and present here tonight. So I've busted it up into 3 sections. The buyback lands and the Reconstruction Authority first up. Look, I expected that we would not get a response from the New South Wales Reconstruction Authority on future uses and restrictions that would be applied to buyback lands within the Richmond Valley. I was expecting that one. All past experiences when asking the Reconstruction Authorities to supply information in the past has been very disappointing. The number of letters, meetings that this council has exchanged with the Reconstruction Authority, and I hope that our community understands that we haven't been sitting still. We have tried everything with them, and across politicians, across all levels of government, since the March 2022 floods, and the outcomes border on total neglect of our Richmond Valley communities, especially the lower river areas. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about that. I think we're of the opinion, well, I know me and Councillor Murray are of the opinion that we've been overlooked. The Reconstruction Authority have done very little and continue to do very little. Current planning requirements. This is part 2 of the notice of motion. The report states that Council has been employing a risk-based approach to the assessment of development applications since before the 22 floods. I agree. Richmond Valley Council Development Assessment has always in the past assessed developments on a criterion of individual circumstances in relation to the development where the depth of water is greater than 2 metres. The advice from the planning circular attached is only a continuation of this. Okay. My issue is the lack of information based around flood hazard clarifications. Okay, H5, unsafe for vehicles and people, all building types vulnerable to structural damage. Some less robust building types are vulnerable to failure. Most of the Woodburn area has a H5 classification. On page 17 of the report, it states, while it may be possible for some development to take place in H5 classification areas where there is low flood velocity, careful consideration is required as to how buildings can be safely designed and constructed in these areas and whether it is financially viable to do so. The maps on page 17, they do not distinguish the velocities of each individual property. The report also states that each property can be individually assessed at DA stage. To me, this section of the report does not supply a clear answer as expected by the community members that showed concern and attended February's meeting, as Clem has put to you tonight. People need to know prior to purchasing and prior to making a commitment to develop a property further, the full hazard restraints that may need to be addressed. Tonight, I'm asking, can council develop an avenue where you can make an inquiry to get confirmation of what flood depths and velocities are relevant to a property and what type of engineering would be required to accompany a development application for it to be successful? I'm going to put that question on notice a bit later in the meeting so that it can be addressed. And so look, that covers the report. Look, I'm happy with the report. There's nothing in there that I didn't expect to get, and I think the Reconstruction Authority need to get answers to those questions sooner rather than later. And I assume you haven't heard anything since the agenda was printed.
Mr. General Manager.
Okay, thank you.
Look, we have regular discussions with the Reconstruction Authority, and in discussions the last couple of days, they've offered to come to our information session in April. So we'll certainly accept that offer, and I'd say it will be at least a couple of their team will come along and talk through some of the questions that you've got, but also the status of the Resilient Homes Program, Resilient Lands Program in particular. So we'll take up that offer, but we'll also pursue obviously the questions that have been asked, so that we get a fulsome response. And our aim will certainly be to have that by our next meeting.
Any other speakers? I did have something. The future outlook. It's pretty statements there of what construction standards may have to happen, but I just need a question, Mr. General Manager. It is expected that the Regional Disaster Adaptation Plan, currently being prepared by the New South Wales Reconstruction Authority, will provide more specific guidance on planning controls and flood planning levels across the region. When do we know when will that plan will be finished, or is that a question for them at the information session?
I think it's a question for them at the information session as to the exact sort of time frame for that, to occur.
I can ask that question, but government may bring in legislation about flood-prone land across the whole state. I don't know. So, yeah, if they done that, well, that would be what council would have to abide by, rather than what we got now, where we can make decisions. So.
Just a little bit more discussion around the flood velocities. I know we're going to come back and question on notice, but it's very unclear. You look at the houses that have been bought back, in particularly Richmond Street, they're in the yellow. There's no, H6 is coloured in on that map in red. There's no houses that I can see there have been bought back in the H6 area, because there mustn't be any properties there. They're in H5, okay? So for me and for the public to look at that and say, okay, they've bought those houses back, they're unsafe to live in, okay? So the ones that are left in the yellow, to me, that tells me they're actually safe to live in. Otherwise, they would have bought them back. Is that a fair statement?
It could be looked at that way.
Well, I'm looking at it that way.
Well, again, with all things planning, it depends on the individual property. But what we are able to do, and we've obviously got our own recent flood study that enables us to give, on a property by property basis, a floor level that is based on the 1% AEP, or in the old terminology, or some people still use it, the 1 in 100 year, plus climate change, plus a 500 mil freeboard. So that determines your habitable floor level. So we can give that on a property basis using our most recent flood study. We can also give a peak velocity of the floodwaters at each property. And so those two figures go into that H5 hazard determination. And so if there is a property that, and then there's the other figure that's in our DCP, is that where there's more than 2 metres of water over a property. And so if it gets into the category of over 2 metres of water, you then need to look at what the velocity is. And planners and engineers make these calls on where the sort of line is as to how you can design to handle that velocity and that depth of water, or where that gets to the point where, well, and then it slips into the H6. So it's a property by property assessment that is done. Look, you're talking about when people are looking to buy a property. We can give that information. I think it's important that we're not giving advice. We're giving information about what the floor level would be for that property, what the velocity is, so that people can make a decision and they can seek their own advice from an engineering consultant as to whether an engineer feels that for whatever they want to build on that piece of land can be built safely to withstand a flood of those levels. So there is information, and that's why it is very much a property by property proposition. But they're the factors that were taken into account, we understand, by the Reconstruction Authority in making their decisions. They used different flood modelling. They did a range of their own investigations. So I know people want certainty, from the planning system, but for the state government to come out and put something in place for flood-prone land across the state, the risk is that will put a blanket level, and we won't have any ability to take those sorts of local factors into consideration. So probably my message there is sometimes you've got to be a little bit careful what you wish for.
Just one more thing on the velocities and the flood levels. The Reconstruction Authority, when they first did their assessments on that, before they did the first round of buybacks, they got all that information wrong. Is that correct? Those reports are not right. The velocities and their levels were wrong, just flat out wrong.
I'm not sure, so let's ask them that question.
Well, it'd be a good question, because one of their people last night told me they got them wrong. There you go. So.
Any other speakers? Councillor Murray, right a reply.
Just before Councillor Murray kicks off, just another thing I noticed. I did a little bit of research. Our DCP has a thing in there too. We're talking about overnight rest areas on the buyback lands. Actually says in there, land is considered unsuitable for that type of development. If it's considered unconsiderable for residential development, it clearly says you cannot put a overnight stay or a caravan park or a mobile home park on that land ever again. It's in the DCP. Part E7, page 59, if you want to have a look.
So that's in our DCP.
Yeah,
As you know, it's a policy.
What's that?
Well, it's a policy that we DCPs have flexibility.
Yes, I realise that. But
And we're in the process of asking that question through the RA with NEMA. But you're right, we would need to reflect that. if we
Similar
move
to
in
the
that
2
direction.
metre rule, when you're doing something for an individual outside of council, that's what comes up. Yep. When you do your research, so.
Just before Councillor Murray, she hasn't had a right to reply, but in conclusion, there's a statement there. Since the 2022 floods, assessment of proposed development on the floodplain has become increasingly more complex, with many key policy issues yet to be resolved. While Planning New South Wales has directed councils to take a risk-based approach to assessment of these developments, it is yet to fully clarify what that approach should entail. Would you like council to chase up Minister Scully to find that out?
At the moment, you lodge a development application tomorrow to build something in Woodburn, it's going to be assessed under the current rules and, you know, the way they've been doing it for a long time. No doubt they're going to scrutinise it a lot more, and they're probably going to pull up the flood velocities and that, but you've probably got more chance of getting something over the line now than you may have in the future, which is a worry.
Well, that's what I'm asking
That's
you.
what we don't want to do.
That's what I'm asking you. Do you want us to take it to the minister and ask
No,
him
just
to get cracking on it?
Yeah, in layman terms, just pull your head in.
Councillor Murray, right a reply.
Before I do, Mr Mayor, through you, I do have a question to the relevant staff member. Can anybody confirm if the objective of the Resilience Homes grants was to in fact make homes more resilient to keep communities in communities, or was it to move homes out of destroying fabrics of communities?
Councillor, just the question's always not to relevant staff, it goes straight to the General Manager. Yep. Mr General Manager.
Oh, good. I think I'll need to answer this one. The Resilient Homes program has the buybacks and the retrofits. Look, again, it's probably at best a question for our chat with RA staff, but I mean, it's also, for me, it's been a fair journey, and I'm just testing my memory of the sequence of how these things rolled out. And so the Resilient Homes program, there was initially definitely a focus on buybacks, and so there was a period where buybacks were the focus, and because that was in some areas the highest priority coming from community. There was a point where it then shifted to, well, no, we want more of the retrofits, the raisings, and then there was there's a lot of scenarios. It's been a hectic journey, so I'm just probably best to take it on notice to make sure that I give you the correct sequence, and I think it's also good for us to have that conversation with the Reconstruction Authority staff. We can give them a heads up so that they can, I don't know, I'd be surprised if they don't have a chronology of what's occurred over the last 3 years. It's certainly a good place to start, because I know that the staff that we are likely to have join us haven't been the full journey, because that is one of the things that, if you look back over the last 3 years, there's been quite a bit of change. They've been dealing with recovery at the same time that they're actually been establishing new organisations, and I know people give David Witherden a hard time, but and ultimately, he was the CEO and he's accountable, but he had a tough gig trying to establish a new organisation after Australia's largest ever natural disaster. So I think, I know it's probably easy for me to sit here and say that, but I think it's a lot of people have put a lot of time and effort into this. They've done the hard yards, done a lot of hard work. We haven't got it right, but I think that journey, there's a lot in it. So I think it'd be a useful exercise for us just to understand the steps through the process, because there have been changes of direction along the way, including a change in government, which when that occurred, there was 6 months when things ground to a halt. So that's, Anyway, we'll put something together and we can give the RA team a heads up, so we can have a good conversation with them at our workshop that can then inform a follow-on, report back to our community.
Thank you. I think that's a difficult one to tell homeowners that have been sitting there waiting for 3 years, particularly some who have spent over $140,000 repairing their homes only to have it bought back, losing 140 grand in the process. And there's many stories similar to that. So I think, whilst I understand there's complexity in it, I also think that, there's a simple way of delivering this funding, and I don't think 57 million is a salary that should be sitting against what should have been a very easy to implement grant if it was done fairly and equitably. Mr. Mayor, am I able to ask you a question, or am I allowed to?
Me?
Is Councillor Murray able to ask you a question?
Yeah.
I can see.
Whether I answer or not, it's a different thing.
That's all right. Okay. I can see you met with the Reconstruction Authority's CEO Mal Lanyon on the 20th of February. Can I ask if you followed up on the questions that I raised at the last meeting in that meeting with him?
20th of February?
It says in this agenda, I think I'm reading it correctly.
Yeah,
That was
20th of February?
20th of February.
Yeah,
Yep.
meeting with we certainly did. That was in your office, Mal Lanyon. Yes, and we did tell him that those questions will be coming through to him. And I think that's actually the date that council...
It was the Thursday after the meeting.
Yeah, so that's the date. I think if you look back through the agenda, the accompanying letter that we wrote to the RA, I think that's the same date of the 20th we sent it to him.
Well, actually, there's no date on the letter that says February 2025. That's why I asked if the questions are followed up, because I don't think there was a date on that letter.
I've seen
Was
a
it the
letter with
20th?
a date on it.
24th. Yeah, they've received it on the 24th, but it was definitely discussed in detail. Obviously,
Yeah.
it was on that Thursday following the meeting, so we gave him a good overview of, the feedback and concerns of our council.
And then I can see here that you also met with them on the 9th of March, assuming that was about Cyclone Alfred, but I will ask, was there a chance to follow up on those questions on that date?
No, because it was about Cyclone Alfred.
Yeah,
It was
I-
fully focused on that because that was getting in the heat of it.
I understand. Questions that are coming from the community, so I appreciate the response.
Yep.
Councillor Hayes, my numbers are accurate. If the New South Wales Reconstruction Authority's annual report numbers are accurate and the Richmond Valley 2022 flood report are accurate as well. I do have further questions that have come through the community that I will ask later to be added to any subsequent correspondence. But I will close the debate with words from the Reconstruction Authority executives themselves. Amanda Leck, Head of Adaptation, Mitigation and Reconstruction, emphasised the long-term commitment of the New South Wales Reconstruction Authority, stating, "The New South Wales Reconstruction Authority will be here for communities long before and will work with them on recovery and reconstruction long after the disaster has passed." Along with the words of the current CEO and of the New South Wales Reconstruction Authority, Mal Lanyon, who was boots on the ground as the New South Wales Recovery Coordinator during the aftermath of the floods in February and March 2022, who stated, "I think the relationships in the community and the role of the Reconstruction Authority is to work very closely with councils and community to make sure we are working with them to deliver recovery and reconstruction. And I think having those relationships is very beneficial." That was from an article on the 24th of May 2024, an interview on ABC Studio at 6 a.m. with Simon Mumford. I'm not sure the community feel like they've been consulted at all in this process. It is time, though, that the Reconstruction Authority meet with our community in an open, publicly available forum and not closed-door, invite-only meetings. And it's time to deliver what was promised faster. The fight is exhausting, but the numbers do not lie. The funding is not being shared fairly, and our community is being left behind, despite what Mr. Tanner has said in recent radio interviews. It's time for answers, it's time for accountability, and it's time for action. We want our communities to continue to thrive on the village towns along the Richmond River.
Thank you. That closes the debate. All those in favour of the recommendation? Aye. Carried unanimously. We now move to page 27, 14.2, energy from waste, and I believe I call that, so I'll move it. Can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Cornish. Councillors, I mainly call this because our guest speaker, Ms Liz Stopps, mentioned about what we need to do in the future. But before I go to that, I'll just mention that it's well documented, and there's just two paragraphs here about the history on the energy from waste. In mid-2022, we're on page 29. Richmond Valley Council, on behalf of 9 councils on the North Coast, sought expression of interest from the waste management industry to provide long-term alternative waste treatment infrastructure. The EOI sought solutions to processing residential waste, recyclates and organics, food and garden. 16 submissions were received, which clearly demonstrated there was interest from the market in developing infrastructure on the North Coast. The details of these submissions were included in the report at the November 2020 meeting. The EOI process showed that, with the volume of residual waste expected to generate by the North Coast region was approximately 100,000 tonnes, the region did not have sufficient waste for a commercial viability EFW facility using existing proven technology. A minimum of 300 tonnes of residential waste annually would have been required, so there was only a third in our area. And then you can read on about when Richmond Valley decision to pause that. There was a few of those few reasons. One, that it wasn't viable to have one in the area. So this now council's been 2.5 years of waiting and pausing that decision. I believe there's still no DA for parks. So I think it's timely because that was that we would monitor energy from waste in parks. And I think it's timely now that this be removed from our job precinct. And I support that recommendation and the EPA's decision. Is there any other speakers before I close? Councillor Walker.
Mr Mayor, I'm happy with the report and the recommendation to a degree, but I think this is an issue that still almost feels like there's a door ajar somewhere, and I'd like to move an amendment, if I could, to add a point 5 to the recommendation that says that council puts on the record its total opposition to any energy from waste project involving incineration ever being built in the Richmond Valley local government area.
As the mover, I'll accept that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Could you just repeat that so they can get it up, please?
I just think, Mr Mayor, for clarity and given our total, I think everyone in the chamber before the election indicated that. I think it's just clear.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Cornish, I jumped the gun there. Did you, as a seconder, did you want to speak?
No, all good.
Thank you.
I'll just throw a question in there. On
Yes.
Part 4, it says continues to consider other options of alternate waste treatment. Have we had any approaches of late to set anything up out there?
As far as our waste business, no, not of late. But there is the work that the Casino Food Co-op are doing around a biohub. So that was hence my hesitation. We haven't had opportunities. It's a difficult industry to secure the technology at an affordable price when you've got small volumes, which comes back to why we did that EOI and we did all that work for the North Coast. You know, with 13 councils and what are the opportunities. Working regionally is challenging. Getting enough councils to want to work together, who've all got their different individual circumstances, their different politics. You know, we led that process, but to get it to where we got it to was an achievement. But if we're serious in this region, especially with residual waste of something fresh, it needs to be regional, because you've got to get it to a scale that's big enough to get the economies of scale that it's affordable. So still plenty of work to do.
Councillor Murray.
Just a quick comment. I just want to thank Councillor Walker for the amendment providing that clarity to the community, and just make a comment that I think we do need proactive waste solutions to achieve a zero waste objective and lead that circular economy. But I know that's a very complex problem, and I think there is some really great innovations happening globally that we can potentially draw down on to explore what those solutions could be.
Any other speakers? Councillors, Ms Stops mentioned that we need to look at what we're going to do in the future. The report clearly says that. The council investigations have demonstrated that the energy from waste facility is not viable investment, and our community will still need to identify alternative solutions for managing residential waste in a longer term. The opening of Cell 6 at the Namurna facility will provide some 12 to 15 years of waste management security, but beyond 2040, which won't take long to come around, there are as yet no identified alternative. As the General Manager said, councils can't keep treating their waste. It comes at a massive, massive cost, their own waste, and we're seeing what's happening in the region now, where most of the councils are sending their waste to Queensland, as we did. If the border is closed by a Queensland government, or they put up their waste levy and make it uneconomical, well, the ratepayers will have to pay more to take it up there, or as I said, the borders could close. This area is in dire straits. We're right, but I know there's some councils that aren't. So it has to have a regional focus. I'm talked to a couple of mayors about that, and I'll be pursuing that further. I believe there's work, is it at Bega? There's one down the town down the south coast, or it might be inland a bit, who are trialling a lot of waste disposal, and I think we need to monitor them. I've seen them on one of the ABC shows, and there's hope from some of those new processes that hopefully that we can adopt and look at ourselves. But 2040 will not take time to come around, and to plan a new waste facility could take 10 years by the time you get all the licensing and all that and find the land. And so, yeah, it's something this council will need to act on in this term, so it can be fed down the chain for coming councils. Waste is complex, and everyone creates waste. They talk about systems where you have no waste, circular economy. I really don't know if any of those fully exist. I know in Europe some countries say that they do, but apparently it's sent to other councils, other countries, shipped out, like they're doing here in Queensland, to Queensland, and 200,000 tonnes after the 2022 floods was collected around this area and went out of the area to Newcastle and Queensland. That's not being responsible for your own area. So this council really needs to start looking at what we can do and what our region can do. But that's a job that we need to get our head around. To close the debate, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Carried. (15.1), I'll move that. It's a planning item. Let's get a seconder. Councillor Morrissey. Any debate? Put that motion in. All those in favour? Carried. 15.2, I think Councillor Hayes, you mentioned this one.
I called it because I got a question, so I can get a seconder, I'll ask the question.
Councillor Hayes moving. Seconder. Councillor Morrissey. Councillor Hayes.
In the report, it says each year council sets its water charges for various customers and publishes them in the revenue policy. There are three main types of water customers, which 1, 2, 3. They forgot to mention the customers who are on water supply contracts, which use a large percentage of our water. I think that, you know, to be transparent, I think that should be in there.
Mr.
And
General Manager.
it should form part of that report.
Which page are you on, please, Councillor Hayes?
Page 33.
Yep. So what would you like?
Include part 4 to it, and they change it to council sets its water charge for various customers. There are three main types. Well, there are four main types of water customers, 1, 2 and 3, and the fourth one will be customers who are on water supply contracts.
Are they covered by number 2? Industrial commercial? I think I know where you're going, but I think they're covered by number 2.
You think so?
Yeah, they're connected to the
Industrial,
network.
industrial industries. It's an industry.
Yep.
I think it's covered.
It's just,
So that's up to you, in your hands, if you've...
well, it just
up
comes
to
at
you.
that transparency, doesn't it? Well, we hiding the fact that we got water contracts out there?
Yeah, but it's factual. It's an industrial commercial customer who is connected to the network.
But the focus of this report is on a follow-up to a previous report, and that previous report has more detailed information, and this is a report back to say we've been out, we've consulted, we didn't get any feedback, we're bringing it back to you. But if you look at the previous report, which does the report specifically say a date? I mean, it was exhibited from the 20th of December to the 11th of February, so I think it was from memory, it was the November report, unless we're very quick to get it out on exhibition. It might have been December, but that report included more detail. So, you know, I mean, I think in fairness, this is a report back to a previous report, and we can obviously provide you with that report again if you'd like to look at it, or if someone in the community wants to.
I've seen that report.
Yep.
Any other speakers? Put that motion in. Those in favour? Carried. Now go to item 16 on page 36. There's no items in the projects and business development. Next, page 37. Councillor Walker.
Mr Mayor, I'll move the recommendation, firstly.
Seconder.
Yeah, I'll think.
Councillor Hayes. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I just wanted to point out the graph on page 39 of the report, which is the comparative data for other councils in the JO, and thank Director Gator for including that information. I think it bodes well for the council. I think it tells a story, and I think it should be pointed out to the community that we're doing very, very well, and the staff should be commended on the returns that we are getting with our investments.
Thank you. I think you called for those graphs previously, and I'd also like to mention on page 40, the ethical investments. I think we lead that there too, which is a bit surprising compared to some other councils that go that way. So, yeah. Any other speakers? Councillor Murray? Oh, sorry, who seconded that? Councillor Hayes, did you want to speak?
Yeah. Oh, no, I don't. No.
Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just want to thank the relevant staff member for including the fossil fuels graph in there too. Again, it is a bit concerning. I think that we're the highest percentage of our portfolio is leveraged against fossil fuels, but hoping we could maybe do a... Is that right? Am I reading that correctly? No. Oh, the reverse. Well, in that case, amazing, great job. That's great to see.
And probably just to be clear, it's institutions who, so we don't necessarily have products that are in supporting a fossil fuel industry. It's about we're in an institution that otherwise does support the fossil. I think there's just a distinction,
okay. Yeah, thank you. And I just noticed the big word not there, so I appreciate that.
Other speakers? Councillor Walker, right a reply? Put that motion in. All those in favour? Carried. Page 41, general business, there's nil. We'll now go over the page to page 42, matters for information. Can I get a mover, please? Councillor Morrissey and a seconder, Councillor Walker. Councillor Morrissey, Councillor Walker.
Mr Mayor, could I just, in relation to item 19.1, I know some time ago we had the issue of council representation on the ARIC committee before us, and we chose, well, nobody was prepared to nominate. Could I ask that that matter come back to council to be reconsidered? Having read the minutes and understanding what's there, I do believe we ought to have a councillor on that committee, and I'd like it to be put back to the council for consideration.
Do you want to put a notice of motion in, or do you want it to come back as a report?
I'm happy to do whichever way you think, but I'd like it on the agenda so we can determine a representation.
Has it been 3 months since that was decided? It would be, wouldn't it? Anyway, all right, we'll do it. Yep, okay.
Look, we can check it, and we can either bring in a report, or if...
as soon as we can, we will.
Yeah, we can go to Councillor Walker about options, but that's fine if that's something that can be reconsidered. Obviously, we're in a process of EOI for a chair. So yeah, it might be timely just to review where we're at.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Ricker, but I think it is, and I think council should be represented. And I apologise for not accepting the nomination last time round. If it's made again, I might accept it.
Okay, any other speakers? Any matters for information? I think you raised one earlier, Councillor Murray. You were asked a question on one, I think, and
19.3, sorry.
Was it 20 something or page 20? I'm not sure.
Oh, it's 19.3. I had a question.
On which one?
Oh, 19.3.
Yep.
So I've just noted here that there is a rail trail habitat restoration grant. And I have had some questions from the community, I guess, around the rail trail and the cost of maintenance. Is that a grant? Are we financing the maintenance of the rail trail through grants, or is it ratepayers, or is the New South Wales government chipping in to help maintain that asset?
Mr. General Manager.
We're certainly not maintaining it through grants that are from the Biodiversity Conservation Fund. If that is successful, I think that's tied to obviously the microbat colony that we have in the tunnel up on Norton's Gap. Look, as far as maintenance to the rail trail goes, we do have a reserve fund that came from the basically the recycling of the steel that was the train tracks. So when we went to tender that, we actually got we'd actually pay for that tender. We got a return. It was a positive return, which doesn't happen very often with tenders. So that was around $600,000. So we've put that into a maintenance fund. So that's at the stage what we're using to fund maintenance of the trail.
And then will we be thinking long-term after that fund is run out that we'll be applying for grants, not for the habitat restoration, of course, but other relevant grants to fund that maintenance, or is that likely to come out of ratepayers?
Oh, look, we're certainly always looking for grant funding opportunities, but look, the day may come, if that maintenance fund is dry, that we need to make decisions about how we fund maintenance. We're obviously aiming to minimise the level of maintenance on that trail. Really, the maintenance is fixing any damage from tends to be maybe a bit of vandalism, or we've had some recent damage with a storm that went through, and also basically some vegetation control, whether that's a bit of mowing or some spraying.
Thank you.
Just on that, I think the rail trail held up pretty well in the cyclone, didn't it?
The trail itself is, you wouldn't know really anything had happened. There was just a couple of, on the sides, a couple of areas where you could see that there was a bit of wash, and there was an access to a property on Powell's Road that was washed out but was been fixed because it was obviously access to a property. So overall, really untouched.
And I think at a previous meeting, Director Zeller said that the rail trail is covered under natural disaster funding. Is that correct? So, yep. Any other items from anyone? I'll put that motion in. All those in favour? Carried. You favour, Councillor Walker? Yep. You're up. Next one is, I think, 20? Questions on notice. There's a report there. Do I need to move it for that? Yeah. Someone move that, please?
I'll move that,
Councillor
Mr.
Murray.
Mayor.
Or does it need a motion or not? There's no recommendation. Stephen note or what? Oh, sorry. Couldn't see it. They're usually up high. Right, we have a recommendation. The council is to seek response from the New South Wales Reconstruction Authority to the questions on notice raised by Councillor Murray. It has been moved by Councillor Murray. Can I get a seconder, please?
Yeah, second.
Councillor Hayes had the light on. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to ask if council could include additional questions in its follow-up correspondence and request a quicker response. I think 8 weeks is simply too long, regardless of having Cyclone Alfred hit the shores or make landfall recently. Also, can the responses be made publicly available as soon as they're received to the community? So the additional questions for the Reconstruction Authority regard the $5 million the $5 million of grant funding for the Return and Own program, with any funds allocated to Richmond Valley residents, what the amount was and how many homes were worked on as part of that program, if there were any. I've got these written down, I can send them through. Regarding the undisclosed funding amounts, how much funding was actually spent on the Living Lab and Lismore City Council's Converge program? Another question is, will the Reconstruction Authority CEO and executives agree to attend an open meeting in Woodburn, Coraki and Broadwater to discuss the next phase of rolling out the remaining house raise and retro refit grants? And finally, GIVIT was announced as the primary fundraising vehicle by the state government. How much has been raised for Cyclone Alfred and how much of that has been allocated in vouchers to Richmond Valley people who have been impacted by the cyclone?
Councillor, are they questions you're asking?
No, they're questions I want to go back, because you've got to follow up, right? That's the recommendation that you're following up with the Reconstruction Authority. So what I'm asking for is there's additional questions that have been raised by the community now, and can they be added to the letter?
So here we're dealing with questions on notice that you've given before, right? So that's a recommendation for them. Those new questions, you will have to take them over to item 21 for questions for the next meeting. All right?
My apologies, I'm
Okay,
still
thank
learning
you.
the process.
Thank you. So you have moved 20.1. Do you want to speak on that report?
No, I've said everything I need to say on that tonight,
Okay,
thank
all
you.
right. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Carried. Now, is there any questions for the next? Oh, I'm sorry. Councillor Hayes.
Just to
apologise.
reiterate how disappointed I am that we didn't get the answers, and hopefully when the answers come, they are what we're expecting.
I have to give back to write a reply, Councillor Murray, before I put it.
I amplify Councillor Hayes's comments.
Thank you. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Carried. My apologies for that. Questions for the next meeting? Councillor Murray, would you like to, you've mentioned them, would you like to give those or email them through so the staff can follow them up on? Is that okay?
Yes, Latoya's got those, but there's still more. Can I add those as well?
Sorry?
There's more questions. Okay.
You can talk it.
Well, I've been in deep consultation with the
Point
community
of order,
this week.
Mr Mayor.
Yes?
This is a section for questions in writing. It doesn't give councillors
Yeah.
the opportunity of reading them out. They must be submitted in writing. I think we've,
And,
you know,
and that is the ruling. And Councillor Murray, to people be sending you questions in while you're most probably there, if you've got them before, please bring them in writing, because it does say in writing.
Okay.
Okay?
So I'll send them to.
Okay,
We've
thank
always
you.
been able to read them out.
Sorry?
We've always been able to read them out.
Yes, but you need to have them in writing and give them to them too. Robert. Yeah.
Mine in writing, I'm going to read them out.
Yeah, but you'll give them to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
She's emailed them.
That's,
Is that not in writing?
well, it's, technically it is, but we'd like to have them so we can give them to you. Yeah. Have you got any more questions? When you're ready.
Can I make a comment? How come questions can be raised and submitted from Councillor Hayes, but I can't submit questions? Because he's got his written on a piece of paper.
Well, that's what it says in writing. Maybe we need to change it around, but look, we're getting real technical here, but
Well, what's
some of these questions we're getting at a council meeting, honestly, can be dealt with by sending the General Manager an email through the week. And you'll notice that there's other councillors in the room don't bring them to meetings because they're dealt with in the process of council. And that's how we go about it. And a lot of those questions are answered and dealt with in that time of having to wait another month to get the reply back. So it just takes that extra time. But look, I know they're in writing, but in future, can you bring them in writing so the staff can have them? And it's good sometimes if they want to put them up, to give them beforehand. But if you want to, this is a new one for me. I don't mind telling you in all my time that I've never seen. Yes, Mr. General Manager.
Technically, they should be provided in writing. This council hasn't got many of these, and so when there is some questions, we have provided, the opportunity, because it's usually a couple of questions about a topical issue, we deal with it and move on. But when I suppose it builds up and there's more questions, you get to the point where we have to revert back to the code, and the code says provide them in writing.
Point of order, Mr Mayor. I think I'm raising a point of order because the code of meeting practice is important. It's the only way that an open council meeting can be conducted properly. Information sessions are very different, as we know. You have been very generous tonight, Mr Mayor.
Very generous on
because
many,
our code of meeting
occasions.
The code of meeting practice also said councillors should only speak once to a motion. Councillor Hayes spoke 5 times on one motion tonight, for your generosity. And I think if we're going to run our meetings properly, we have to stick to the code of meeting practice.
Councillor Walker, I try to be as flexible as possible, as you noticed with some of the people that spoke at public access. They went well over their time. I try to run a fair and open meeting for our community rather than shutting people down. But I must say, if things start continuing, I noticed one councillor spoke where there was a time limit on time to speak, went on, and I let that go. But we need, if we're going to start to call point of orders, and I don't think I've ever had one in 8 years, I don't want to go down that path. So I would ask councillors to try to come back in and follow the code of meeting practice, please.
Can I respond to that?
Councillor Hayes, have you got a question on, for the next
have.
meeting?
What's the time limit for us to speak in council? It's not
5
in
minutes.
writing.
5 minutes.
Where does it say that?
In the code of meeting practice.
Okay, thank you. Didn't know that one. Okay, back to this one. I've got 2 questions on notice in writing. They're in writing, and I'd like to read them out. The one I asked before, I want it because I want the answer put in the business paper, so everyone knows that I've asked the question and we've got an answer. That's why I like to see the questions on notice going asked. Anyway, so can council develop an avenue where you can make an inquiry to get confirmation of what flood depths and velocities are relevant to a property and what type of engineering would be required to accompany a development application to be successful? Okay, I asked that one earlier. And 2, if the CSIRO flood report due out in June 25 results in flood mitigation measures that will result in lowering flood levels by a metre or more, what could that do to the flood hazard classifications in our villages and surrounding areas moving forward?
Thank you. So Councillor Murray, you can please email those questions in if you wish, or bring them in writing, or bring them to the next meeting. Okay? Yeah, and future meetings, please have them in writing. Okay? It's the...
No, but in writing, well, technically, they should be just in writing, and no one should read out the question. And no one should read out their questions.
Yeah.
The idea it's in writing.
Well, technically, the General Manager's telling me that you should have your
Hand them over.
questions in writing and no reading them out.
They get reflected in the minutes, right? So you hand them over in writing, we get them, they go in the minutes, people can read the minutes, and we give you answers at the following meeting. Technically, that's how this item works. We've been flexible.
We've been very flexible, and sooner or later, it's like anything, if people don't stay within the rules have to be enforced, unfortunately. So, thank you. Next item is 22, matters referred to closed council. Mr General Manager, has there been any written sorry, I need a motion to go into closed council. Councillor Morrissey, a seconder.
Second. Over here.
Councillor Humphries. Mr General Manager, has there been any written representation made regarding this meeting going into closed council?
None received.
Are there any verbal representations from the members of the public? Yeah. For those in the gallery who don't understand, we are now going into closed council to discuss 3 items. We will come back in. The doors will be opened after those items are discussed, and the motions from that will be read out. Thank you. Thank you for your attendance. Have a safe trip home. I'll now put that motion. All those in favour? Carried. Mr General Manager, could you read or ask a staff member to read the resolutions of closed council, please?
I'll hand that to Directors Eller and Gator for their reports. Thanks.
In the item 22.1, tender VP 430435, design and construct casino suspension bridge. Resolve that 1, council accepts the tender for design and construction of the casino suspension bridge from Fleetwood Urban Proprietary Limited, as it represents the best value for council at $3,259,927, exclusive of GST. And 2, the General Manager be authorised to negotiate and finalise the terms and conditions of any contract or agreement in line with the content of this report and the available budget, and affixing the seal of council where necessary.
In matter 22.2, regional procurement tender REG PRO 412425, provision of traffic control services. Resolve that 1, council accepts the tender from the following suppliers for regional procurement tender REG PRO 412425, provision of traffic control services on a schedule of rates-based contract for a period of 3 years with an option of 2 times 1 year extension subject to performance from LAC Group, Atlas Traffic and Workforce International Group. And 2, the General Manager be authorised to negotiate and finalise the terms and conditions of any contract or agreement in line with the content of this report and the available budget, and the affixing of the seal of council where necessary. And in matter 22.3, tender REG PRO 402425, road safety barrier systems. Resolved that 1, council accepts the tender from the following suppliers for regional procurement tender REG PRO 402425, road safety barrier systems on a schedule of rates-based contract for the period of 3 years with an option of 2 times 1 year extension subject to performance from road safety barriers, Irwin Family Trust and On Time Guardrail. And number 2, the General Manager be authorised to negotiate and finalise the terms and conditions of any contract or agreement in line with the content of this report and the available budget, and affixing the seal of council where necessary.
That's it. That brings the meeting to an end. Thanks everyone for your attendance, and have a safe trip home, and we'll see you in 2 weeks at the Information Centre.
Just for the new councillors, mostly, because I don't